You directed a complex operation for the importation and supply of cocaine. The operation involved cash being provided by you to fund Mr. Bilsland's apparently legitimate imports.
A man with a keen eye had been hiding for years. He was a master at evading capture, never making the wrong move. But one day, something inside him urged him to go for a jog. The manhunt had lasted forever, and he had nearly slipped through the cracks. The next thing he knew, he was behind bars. How did he end up there? One meeting, one hotel, and everything fell apart. That was his biggest mistake, or was it? This is the story of Scotland's most wanted drug lord of all time, aka the Iceman. Hit that subscribe button and step into the underworld. Jamie the Iceman Stevenson was a name that sent shivers down the spines of many in Scotland. Born and raised in Glasgow, he was no stranger to the city's gritty streets.
Glasgow in the 1980s was scarred by poverty, gangs, unemployment.
From a young age, he found himself drawn to the wrong side of the law, getting involved in petty crimes that slowly escalated over time. As he grew older, Jamie's criminal activities became more organized. He earned the nickname the Iceman because of his cold, calculating nature and his ability to stay calm under pressure. He wasn't just a small-time crook, he was a mastermind, pulling the strings behind a vast network of illegal operations. His empire was built on smuggling drugs like cocaine and cannabis. He had connections that stretched far beyond Scotland, reaching into international drug syndicates. This global network allowed him to move large quantities of drugs across borders, making him a significant player in the criminal underworld.
Stevenson was released in 2013 at the start of a decade of international drugs importation. Its scale emerged when he and 5 others were nicked in June 2020 over a £14 million street Valium factory in Rochester in Kent. Astonishingly,
Stevenson's reputation for being ruthless and untouchable was well earned. He managed to evade the law for years, keeping his operations under wraps and his associates loyal. His influence in Scotland's criminal world was immense, and he seemed to be always one step ahead of the authorities. But how did he manage to stay hidden for so long? What was the secret behind his success, and what finally led to his downfall? Stevenson, once a near untouchable force in the criminal world, started to feel the pressure mount. For years he had eluded law enforcement, running a vast and highly sophisticated drug empire. But as time passed, the walls began to close in on him. The authorities, who had long been aware of his operations, were now using cutting-edge technology and international cooperation to track his every move. Surveillance operations became more advanced, and his empire's secrecy became harder to maintain. At the same time, Stevenson found himself under increasing pressure from rival gangs. As his power grew, so did the threats. These gangs, eager to challenge his dominance, began encroaching on his territory, forcing him to divert more resources to fend off attacks and defend his empire. Every decision he made had huge risks, and the stress began to show. He was no longer operating with the confidence that had once made him legendary in Scotland's criminal underworld.
Stevenson was released in 2013 at the start of a decade of international drugs importation.
Running a drug empire of such vast scale was no easy feat. There were countless moving parts, smuggling routes, money laundering, communication channels, and corrupt officials to keep things running smoothly. The logistics of keeping everything operational while avoiding detection was incredibly complex. One slip-up, one misstep, and everything could come crashing down. As the operation grew, so did the risks. Stevenson knew this more than anyone. He was a constant target, not just from the law, but from those who wanted to take his empire down. Internally, things were starting to crumble as well. There were whispers of betrayal. Stevenson had built his empire on trust, but now that foundation was starting to shake. Close associates who once served him loyally began to betray him, selling information to the police in exchange for leniency. This betrayal left Stevenson paranoid, wondering who he could trust. His once solid inner circle began to fracture, and his fear of being exposed intensified. Stevenson's paranoia and vulnerability grew, and he began questioning everyone around him. But what truly shattered the empire? What was the one moment that brought everything crashing down? The answers are close, and they lead to one key event: a single meeting. Once a shadowy figure in Scotland's criminal underworld, Stevenson was about to make a decision that would unravel his empire. By 2019, law enforcement agencies across the globe had finally caught on to the vast criminal empire empire Stevenson had built. It was no longer a matter of if they would catch him, but when. This marked the beginning of Operation Venetic, a joint effort between the UK's National Crime Agency and international law enforcement bodies. Stevenson, like many high-level drug lords, thought he was untouchable. His operation spanned continents, and for years he had managed to keep a low profile, using encrypted communication networks to shield his criminal dealings. But the game had changed. With Operation Venetic, law enforcement deployed sophisticated technology to crack encrypted messaging systems widely used by criminal organizations. Stevenson and his associates communicated through secure platforms, thinking their messages were safe, but the authorities were already listening, gathering intel that would soon piece together the puzzle of Stevenson's sprawling drug empire. The information collected from intercepted messages proved critical. Stevenson, like many criminals at the time, was relying on encrypted devices to run his business from the shadows. The law enforcement agencies followed every lead, compiling mountains of evidence that connected Stevenson directly to vast drug smuggling operations. But it wasn't just the data that gave them the upper hand. It was the key breakthrough that came with a critical meeting.
They discovered that he had no luggage, so it was a strange and suspicious activity. So the Spanish police followed Bilsland to a hotel in Alicante where he met a man for coffee. Obviously the Spanish police had no idea who this guy was, but they took pictures of the pair together and sent those pictures back.
In early 2020, Stevenson found himself in Spain, orchestrating a deal with other drug gangs to expand his operations. He was accompanied by his trusted associate, David Bilsland, a businessman from Glasgow known for his fruit import business. Their plan was to discuss logistics and strategies to enhance their smuggling routes and distribution networks. The meeting was set in a hotel in Alicante, a coastal city known for its bustling tourism and vibrant atmosphere. Stevenson and Bilsland chose this location to avoid suspicion, believing that the city's transient nature would provide the perfect cover for their clandestine discussions. However, unbeknownst to them, their every move was being closely monitored. Law enforcement agencies had been gathering intelligence on Stevenson's activities for some time. Through surveillance and intercepted communications, they had learned of the planned meeting in Alicante. Spanish police, in collaboration with the National Crime Agency and other international partners, set up a covert operation to monitor their moves. On the day of the meeting, Stevenson and Bilsland arrived at the hotel, unaware of the surveillance operation in place. Undercover agents were strategically positioned, capturing photographs and recordings of the meeting. These images provided crucial evidence of their involvement in the drug trade, including discussions about smuggling routes and distribution plans.
With David Bilsland, at that point, the police had no idea of the scale of the criminality that David Bilsland had.
The intelligence gathered from this meeting became a turning point in the investigation. It allowed authorities to connect various pieces of the puzzle, leading to coordinated raids and arrests across multiple countries. But how did law enforcement manage to infiltrate such a well-guarded meeting? What methods did they employ to gather the critical evidence that led to Stevenson's downfall? Surveillance cameras captured key moments from the meeting, including vital conversations that linked Stevenson to international drug trafficking networks.
EncroChat was a super secure smartphone system. It was based on Android handsets. Almost impossible for people to crack, either by going into the phone or by trying to eavesdrop. It costs you £1,500 to buy the handset, and that only bought you 6 months worth of subscription. If you wanted another 6 months, another £800.
These conversations revealed his plans to smuggle large quantities of cocaine and other illegal drugs into the UK, using methods that were becoming increasingly sophisticated. These details were a goldmine for investigators, providing the final pieces of the puzzle. It was the meeting in Spain that gave them enough evidence to push forward with their plan to bring down Stevenson's empire.
The offences were linked to locations in Glasgow, as well as Plaza del Puerto in Alicante in Spain, and Puerto Bolivar, Ecuador, and the Rai Island Resort in Abu Dhabi. It came after French law enforcement was able to break into the encrypted communications platform EncroChat, leading to hundreds of arrests across the UK.
Once the evidence from the Spain meeting was in the hands of law enforcement, the floodgates opened. With their communication networks infiltrated and the shipment plans confirmed, authorities had enough to act decisively. But as always, with someone as influential and powerful as Stevenson, it wasn't going to be an easy operation. The intercepted communications had provided information on multiple shipment routes, locations for stash houses, and the names of various associates involved in the operation. The authorities moved quickly, targeting known locations and arresting several members of Stevenson's organization. However, the man himself remained elusive. Despite the enormous pressure mounting on him, Stevenson had always managed to stay one step ahead. In 2020, law enforcement had their first major win, the seizure of a large cocaine shipment in Dover, valued at an estimated £76 million.
Millions of pounds worth of drugs were concealed inside boxes of bananas, but the shipment was intercepted by the authorities in Dover in 2020.
The shipment was hidden within boxes of bananas, an increasingly common method for smuggling drugs. But even with this blow to his operation, Stevenson wasn't captured. He had a plan to escape. With every arrest, he grew more paranoid, aware that his criminal world was slowly crumbling beneath him, but he remained hidden.
In case the police were onto him. However, the last shipment that was sent included a ton of cocaine hidden among boxes of bananas. And the police were watching him, and the huge drug haul was intercepted in Dover in September 2020.
Stevenson became one of the most wanted criminals, not just in the UK, but across Europe. His face was plastered on the front pages of newspapers and broadcast on every news channel. Yet, Stevenson had managed to evade capture, slipping through the cracks of law enforcement's grasp. It wasn't until 2022 that Stevenson's luck finally ran out. It's often said that criminals get caught when they least expect it, and for Stevenson, this couldn't have been truer. After years of running a global drug empire and evading capture, Stevenson decided to take a break from hiding. He was there in the Netherlands. One day, with the weight of the world on his shoulders and growing paranoia taking its toll, he had a sudden urge to go for a jog. It was supposed to be a simple escape, a brief moment of normality, but little did he know, it was about to be the moment that would change everything. On that fateful day, Stevenson, feeling confident yet strangely vulnerable, stepped out of his hideout in the Netherlands and began his jog. It wasn't a long run, but it would be the longest one of his life. He wasn't prepared for what was waiting for him just around the corner. Law enforcement, who had been keeping a watchful eye on him for weeks, had tracked his movements and were closing in. He was tracked down and arrested on the spot, far from the prying eyes of the UK police. His capture was the result of a coordinated effort between Dutch National Police, Police Scotland, and the NCA. After a high-speed manhunt, Stevenson was taken into custody, a shadow of the untouchable kingpin he had once been.
Jimmy Iceman Stevenson, the drug kingpin, has been jailed for 20 years.
Following his arrest, Stevenson was swiftly extradited to Scotland. The trial that followed was a formality. With the mountain of evidence stacked against him, ranging from the intercepted communications to the cocaine shipments, the court had no choice but to convict. Stevenson was sentenced to 20 years in prison for directing the importation of drugs, including nearly a ton of cocaine. His reign as one of the most powerful drug lords in Scotland came to an abrupt and definitive end. However, the fallout wasn't over. While Stevenson sat behind bars, the web of his criminal empire continued to unravel. Many of his associates were arrested, and his drug operations across Europe and South America were significantly dismantled. But the story didn't end there. Despite everything that had been taken from him, Stevenson was determined to regain control. But what do you think? Is Stevenson still pulling the strings from behind bars, or has his empire finally fallen? Drop your thoughts in the comments and explore more untold stories from the criminal underworld. Hit subscribe and stay connected. Power never truly fades.